My name is Lacy and 25 years ago, as an 18-year-old teenager, I found myself pregnant. And my whole life growing up, I grew up in an amazing, beautiful Christian family. My dad was a pastor, president of a Christian school, and I knew all the things I was supposed to do. I knew where I was supposed to go with my life, and I was taught all the good lessons in life. But the other side of that is that because I had expectations on my life of who I was supposed to be, when I found myself wrapped up in my sin, it also heaped a whole lot of guilt and shame on top of that. I was told my whole life by my mom that if you mess up like this, you're gonna ruin everything that God's ever done with your dad. What I know now is that puts God in a box. But what I didn't know there and that point in time in my life was all I felt was the guilt and shame of that. And so all of that was pouring on top of me. And I had this secret that only I knew. And later on, I decided that I should probably call my boyfriend at the time, and share with him. And I couldn't get the words to come out of my mouth. I couldn't say, I'm pregnant. I couldn't get that to come out. He said, it's okay, God already told me. And I know. And so we just spent a lot of time crying and silence and not having a clue what to do, scared to death. It's probably the best way I can describe where I found myself that first night. Was absolutely terrified. Terrified of all the unknowns and all of what this meant. My intentions were to go to a clinic to find out my options for how I could eliminate all this hurt and shame and guilt, because that's what I thought going to an abortion clinic would do. I just walked in and I just knew something's not right, because everything I'd ever been taught, I had stood in those Right to Life marches, I had stood on the street corners with signs, I had stood hand in hand saying that life was important. I'd been there, done all those things, but when it was me and my choice, that guilt and shame was so strong and the voice was so loud. I got up shaking, literally physically. I don't know if anybody else could see me, but I was just shaking and I walked. But I remember getting to the doorway as she opened the door, and I just grabbed the doorpost and I just lost it. Started crying, and I looked over my shoulder and I told him, I said, I can't do this. I can't do this. What's next led to us going, wait, we know somebody who's been here. We know somebody who's done that. And they happened to be our college and career teachers at the time. And because they had opened up and been honest about when they were in college and how they had had an abortion. And when they opened the door, they said, God told us why you're here. And I thought, oh, how God paves the way. When you make the hard, right choices, how easy that big, wide path that others take is. And when the hard path is, but how God will put the next step in front of you. Even if you don't see the far out picture, he'll make the next step clear. And so they said, well, we can go with you. And it was in that moment that we said, well, we're going to tell my dad first. And my dad, being a pastor, it was a Sunday afternoon, and he was already at his office preparing for his message. So we walked into his office, and Daniel said, before we went in, he said, I need to take responsibility for this. I need to be the one to tell him. This is an us thing, not a you thing. And the weight that took, because the man in my life, even though he was just my boyfriend, stood up for life, my life, and our baby's life, and said, we're in this together. And my dad sat in silence and didn't say anything. And I don't know that it was very long, but it felt like forever. Only thing I knew to do was to fall out of my chair, and I kind of crawled the 4 or 5 feet across the room, and I grabbed my dad's legs, and I just said, Daddy, please, please love me. Please forgive me. And that's all I could get out. And in that moment, the best picture of Jesus on the earth that I could ever have happened. He reached down with his hands and he grabbed both sides of my face and he lifted my head. And he said, I don't have a lot of words right now, but the words that are most important is I love you, and that will never change. And I absolutely love this part of our story. Because this is the moment where today I can tell people I know what it's like to have a father's love for me and the redemptive of Jesus. here on the earth in physical form. My soon-to-be mother-in-law, my boyfriend's mom at the time, she said, I want to tell you something about myself. And she opened up and told me that when she was 16, she had gotten pregnant also. And so because she opened up, she said, but the joy of that is that I've tried to turn that pain into good. And she said, I've been volunteering at this place called the Hope Clinic. And she said, I think I want you to go with me there. When I walked into Hope Clinic, I was loved immediately, and I sat with counselors and I got to hear that I wasn't alone. Because I think that's what Satan tries to do to us in those moments, and why that guilt and shame is so strong is he makes you feel isolated and alone. But after I was here for a little bit of time, I was treated with so much love and care. And the counselor sat with me and said, you're a priceless treasure. You are worth what Jesus says you were, not what you feel. And so when I walked into Hope Clinic and I was loved, it was just another pouring of grace onto my hurt and my wounds so that I could make the next hard choice and the next hard choice and began to walk in healing and restoration because I was offered hope in the midst of my pain. And it set me up for a lot of great things later on in life. This is the truth. You may feel like this, but the truth is you are a priceless treasure. You are God's designed beautiful piece. And so now that is how I spend my life. 25 years later, my son is 24, and we've been married now, about to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. And God is good, and I know our story is not typical. We've walked a path that, even through that, we still fought guilt and shame for a long time. Thought we were undeserving of being in ministry. We both felt called to be in the missions, in the ministry. And 12 years ago, God said, no, it's time. It's time for you to leave that hurtful thing that happened and the pain and shame and trauma you brought on yourself. Leave it at the foot of the cross and step into the calling that I've called you to do.